Hey guys, it's Matt. Hey, this is just sort of a follow-up topic. I have two topics I wanted to just talk about. One question I get quite frequently, and also a real natural kind of tie-in discussion with Windows. So, the first question I get frequently is, I'd like to set up Linux, or I'd like to install Linux, and the question is, what distro should I use? If you go out and you Google Linux distributions, you'll find there's a ton of them out there, and the 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 question is, well, which one do I need? Which one's right for me? Now, for this class, there's no requirement. As you've seen, we provide the server. However, if you're interested in setting one up yourself, I recommend you go and you read, because the answer is basically, what do you want to use it for? Where are you in your Linux and your computing path? Are you real comfortable with the command line, or do you want a desktop environment? So there's a lot of questions to ask that you have to kind of answer for yourself to find the right one. You can't go wrong with popular ones. They're all great today. I will tell you right up front, I prefer Arch, and this is a more of a server end kind of focus for me. It has a very different philosophy than a lot of the regular distributions. So if I installed like a desktop version of Ubuntu, you have server versions, you have desktop versions. But if I went and installed that, I'd get a desktop experience that has all of these windows and these great icons and a window manager that makes them stack in a certain way in response to certain key presses, and themes and icons, and all this great tie-in with the underlying operating system in a very appealing visual way. So that's what I'd like to talk about for the rest of this. If you're comfortable with an operating system that's not graphical, you might choose a server setup, which is what I've done with Arch. Arch takes a very different approach than this sort of what I call the kitchen sink approach, where the OS installs and it kind of gives you everything you're going to need. It detects your network cards, it detects your plugged in USB devices, and everything's all set and ready to go, and all the likely drivers you're going to need are just there, and they're installed and they're ready to go. Arch has a very different approach, and it's kind of more geared to discovery, and a very minimal tool set is installed. This kitchen sink thing isn't part of it. So, for example, I installed it, and then the first thing I had to realize and do was figure out I needed a network driver. So I had to figure out what I needed to do, and with Vim, to get the network driver enabled, and every time I reboot, that would happen again. So that's the kind of learning path I wanted, and I've been doing that for about 3 or 4 years now. I've been involved with Linux since Slackware version 3. I think I compiled my first kernel on a 286 or a 386. Whoa, back in the day. Arch is very kind of in that path. It's learned by doing, and you kind of realize you need to do something, and then you go and you figure out what elements need to be in place, and that's how I like to evolve my system. So Arch is good for me. It may or may not be for you. There is a desktop version, which I think is interesting, and I've never actually used the Arch desktop, but it sure looks really nifty. If you want to give it a shot and let me know what your experiences are, I'd be keenly interested in that. Now, I also want to use this opportunity to talk about windowing systems in general, and specifically the Windows subsystem that's kind of behind or the grandfather of a lot of the current windowing systems. So I have to do that with an over-the-shoulder shot, so I need to switch cameras here and get a little bit of a different setup. But stick around. It's going to definitely be worth your wait. Okay, guys, so here we are. I have a regular old SSH connection open to my server, which is located in the other room, and I'm going to run some applications, and it's kind of interesting what happens. So I have, again, remember, I'm sitting at my Windows box. Just to clarify the setup here, I'm sitting at my Windows box. I have a terminal window open, and I'm using the same SSH connection to the server that we've been using all term, and I'm talking to the shell. So I'm going to run a program, start up a program here called xcalc, and watch what happens. So I got some error messages, and then lo, a window opened right here on my local desktop. So this is kind of strange, but this is a model where the local resources for window drawing are being routed through the SSH connection and providing a server for graphics display on the local terminal to a application that is running remotely as a client. So the terms are somewhat flipped from what we're used to. Client and server kind of are backwards now. The Unix host we've been using, and I've been calling server all term, is now running an application which is functionally a client of a service that is running on my local desktop. And so the odd thing about this is it's a very distributed model. So all of the calculators, buttons, and rendering is being done and handled locally. But if I enter a equation and run it, that calculation is actually being performed remotely. So the program is just using the local services for display, but the actual process that's running is still all on the server. And if you doubt that, let's come back to the SSH connection, and I'll cancel that with a Control-C, and you can see that the window closes. So this is rather interesting and unique. I've never seen anything like it. We're used to carrying around a full window system in our pocket on our Android or iPhone devices, and we usually have either like a remote desktop model or a local desktop model, but it's very rare that you can see an application that is actually kind of running in two places at once for the user. So I think it's neat. A couple other things. I mean, it's all stuff we know. So there's a couple of other change my script directory. Okay, so we can start any number of processes, put them in the background, and they run, they spin up, they do what they do, and we have on the server two processes. If I look at the jobs running in the background, one called xcalc, which is the calculator application, and one called xgears, which is the gear application. So the gear application really kind of demos the fact that these are network calls and they're for graphics drawing, and it's happening on the remote host, but it's being displayed locally. So these applications can be very full functioned. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple more demos here. So I'm going to run 3 applications in the background. These are all, oops, let's see if I can get a zoom in here. These are all written for X11, excuse me, xclock, xcalc, and gears, which is a wrapper around the GTK gears script that I can binary that I can never remember the name of, and then I'm going to just run all of these in the background. So let's look at that. 3 jobs, and oop, they all popped up over here. Let me drag them in to frame. So there's gears, there's the calculator, and if I can get a handle on it here, and here is the clock, which I had to deform to get it over here. Okay, there we go. So they have an analog clock using line drawing controls, line drawing calls, and all kinds of graphics drawing functionality is being exposed through the display server and used remotely on the Unix host. So this is a very chatty output. The applications can be really full-featured. So let me run a program here called GIMP, which is a sort of a Photoshop type graphics program. And you know, when they say they release things for Linux, then you see things like this. You realize that this is kind of all working within the graphics windowing system frameworks that are available, and if not being used natively to implement the the solution. So it's a little slower remotely to open files and do things because of the network calls than it would be if I was running a local instance of a program that was editing a similar type of application. And you don't really notice that you're using a remote application until you go to open a file and you look at the file system and you see that you're actually browsing the remote file system looking for the file that you want to open or work with. So that's a distributed application. This is happening both here on my Windows workspace and also remotely there on the host. So I thought this was interesting. I just wanted to show you that this is not historical by any purpose. This is technology that is living and breathing and in production today and probably at work in a lot of the applications you're using. And here's just one more option. The MOBA Xterm app that I use has a X server on it, which is active when green and provides this interface. There are other X servers you can get. I've played with a few of them. MOBA X server is pretty good. And you can learn a lot about it just if you kind of poke around the documentation, and it will introduce you to some of the terms and the components that you would need to set up a situation, a remote situation like this. But all the tools are there. The technology is there. It's really interesting. Hey guys, hey, I just wanted to make a couple of quick notes here. A frequent question I get is, what kind of Linux distribution should I get? There's tons of them out there. I just wanted to talk about that briefly. What I recommend is you basically go to Wikipedia. They have a great list of Linux distributions that you can look at. They make the broad distinction between the ever-changing landscaping of the available distributions of Linux based on a number of factors, and you can pretty much describe them as how they choose to package them, what tools they use to manage and maintain and update the packages that are installed that comprise the operating system. Also, a big thing that's associated with distributions are what desktop managers or window managers they've chosen to use. This kind of gives you a nice visual distinction between them, although many of the underlying engines that are powering these look and feels of these different distributions are all pretty much the same kind of desktop or window management software, just configured for a particular distribution. But you can see that there's a whole lot of configurability that you can choose from. So what I recommend is you go and you look at the list and you read about the different distributions that are available and see if you can find one that kind of fits your use, your either application or the available hardware you have. One nice thing you can do is you can get either a boot-only data stick installation, or you can do a dual boot situation, so you're not really committing to one. You can try them all out and find one that you like. People ask me what I use. I use if I go to the Pac-Man base here, I use this distribution right here, Arch Linux, which is a very different philosophy than you're going to find with these sort of nice plug-and-play installer distributions. If you get like a Ubuntu and you select the desktop version and you install it, the philosophy with that distribution is that you're going to have pretty much a nice kind of visual impression that something a desktop is there and you've got these applications, and basically it's a very similar thing to if you install a Mac OS or you install the Windows OS. You get this kind of consumer level experience that's here's just this splash of stuff that is going to be very useful to you and you're going to be very productive. And the idea of distributing everything you might possibly need is very common, and I think that that's nice. My motivation for selecting Arch as the distribution that I committed to was basically, this is a distribution that requires you to sort of understand every step of the way. So, for example, when I installed Arch, I immediately didn't have access to a network card. I had to figure out what network card I needed and the drivers and the config files to install it, just to get to the point that I could have a network card. And then, of course, I had to configure the network. And this is not a very, I would think, plug-and-play experience, but I wanted the experience of knowing what I was doing each step of the way. And so for learning, it's probably a little longer-term commitment. However, I have a server that's been running for about 3 years now, and it's been running on this thing, and I love it. So that's what I can advise you. There are tons of these distributions that are changing all the time, and there are some big ones: Ubuntu, Red Hat. What's the other ones I'm thinking of? Debian. So just go hit Wikipedia and just check it out.